Everybody for joining us here today. This is the Turnpike 395.3 hours of service rule change update. The purpose of this webinar is to discuss what the rule changes are, what impact it may have to your organization, and some of the changes you may have to encounter, as well as how Turnpike will be supporting these changes and what your drivers and managers will encounter as they implement these new changes. So the first line of business here is to discuss what these changes are. So the first changes were actually a few months ago, February 27th, and those changes were more of an allowance rule rather than a new regulation. What happened is that drivers were forced to leave their vehicle if they were going to be in an off-duty status. And that made things a little bit difficult at times, and so what happened in February is that drivers can now perform rests or take a lunch or essentially just log time in the vehicle, in a parked vehicle, as off-duty time, where, again, in the past it was required to be on-duty time. And this is extremely important as we look down to the new rule change for July 1st with the brakes, so we'll get to that in a second. But yes, now drivers can be in a parked vehicle in an off-duty status, whereas before they did have to be outside of the vehicle if they wanted to be in off. Second, for those drivers, those team drivers, those team trips, where you've got two drivers in a sleeper berth cab, and the co-driver can now sit in the passenger seat and log that time as off-duty. Now, they can only do that for up to 2 hours, and it has to be adjacent to immediately before or after at least 8 hours of sleeper berth time. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail here as we move forward, as it introduces some significant changes to behavior, but it is now time that a co-driver, would be required to be in an on-duty status if they were in the passenger seat of a moving vehicle. Now they can log that as off-duty time, again, up to 2 hours of it. Then, coming July 1st, are some new requirements of what drivers are going to have to abide by. So the first one listed here is the mandatory 30-minute off-duty break. And so that 30-minute off-duty break must occur within 8 hours of the last off-duty or sleeper berth segment of at least 30 minutes. So essentially what that means is when a driver comes on duty to start his day, that would mean that within 8 hours he's going to have to take at least a 30-minute break. If he takes it early enough in the day, he may actually end up having to take another one before the end of his day. 34-hour reset, a 16-hour big day, for example, could force a driver to take more than one. In many cases, it would. So just something to keep in mind, again, that off-duty time has to be at least 30 minutes, and it has to happen within 8 hours of the last off-duty or sleeper berth segment of at least 30 minutes. The other one here is kind of the same rule, but in two parts. The 34-hour reset now has two new conditions. For a driver to get a valid 34-hour weekly reset, the reset time must include 2 full periods of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the time zone in which their log is generated. So their home domicile, they've got a time zone from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. in that time zone. They have to have 2 of those segments complete within that 34-hour reset. So this brings up some issues. If a driver runs out of time, let's say around 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. or 3 a.m., what ends up happening is that the driver loses that particular day in his reset. So he'd end up potentially having to get up to 52 hours off. Now, this is the worst case scenario, but that 34-hour reset is a minimum 34-hour reset, as we all know, but now must include, as of July 1st, would now include 2 full segments of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. The second condition with 34-hour reset is that it can only be taken once every 168 hours. So essentially what that just means is that 168 hours, or a minimum of 7 full calendar days or 7 full days, has to have elapsed between the beginning of his last weekly reset and the beginning of his next weekly reset. If the driver tries to take it in less than 168 hours, it's just not possible. It's not acceptable. So it would not count as a valid weekly reset. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that here in just a moment. But those are the major rule changes with the 395.3 update. So what's the potential business impact here? Well, obviously, everybody's operation is a little bit different. Your scheduling, your customers, the way you conduct business is different for everybody. So you'll run into some of these and maybe not run into all of them, whereas some people might run into all of them. So where it might impact your business, probably the most likely place for everybody to be impacted is the 34-hour reset. So companies who do long haul, who do a lot of starts and stops throughout the course of a week, and drivers who are used to or accustomed to getting a weekly reset every few days or so, it won't be possible anymore. So if that 34-hour off-duty segment occurs less than 168 hours since the beginning of the last valid reset, it will just count as essentially a daily reset. That's all it will really account for. So it's just important to keep in mind that drivers aren't going to get back their 70 hours or their 60 hours just because they got 34 hours off. It has to be 34 hours off plus those 2 new conditions, meaning you get both of those 1 to 5 a.m.s, and you make sure that you aren't expecting it in less than 168 hours since your last one. So like I mentioned before, this could be as high as 52 hours, and frankly, it could even be longer if you think about if a driver begins his off-duty break, his weekly reset. Let's say if he takes it in less than 168 hours since the last one, the reset won't actually begin until that 168 hours has been accumulated. So again, it's beginning of the last valid to the beginning of the next valid 34-hour reset. So those are very important things to keep in mind. And some of the operations where drivers perform only a few times a week, or maybe it's a 5-day operation or 6-day operation, again, it's going to have to be, if your reset happened at 7 a.m. on Saturday, you won't be able to get another reset until it begins at least at 7 a.m. the following Saturday. The next one, off in a parked vehicle, is really more so just a benefit to most operations. It's just a matter of a situation where the driver can stay in the vehicle, and this is really important, especially when we start talking about brakes. Drivers will be able to pull over to the side of a highway, on the side of the road, stay in the cab, safer there. Maybe they can do some paperwork or take their lunch, but they no longer have to leave the cab. Now, this is important because, again, as of July 1st, these drivers are going to be forced by the regulations, forced to take a 30-minute off-duty break. And that's the best way to go about doing that is, again, it might coincide with a customer stop. It might coincide with a fueling. It might coincide with a lunch that's going to happen anyway. But it is a situation where the system is going to prompt the driver, let them know that they are running out of time leading into their required break. The other piece about the break is that when it comes to California state labor laws, California has labor laws around when all employees within the state of California have to take specific breaks, and it shows up in their payroll, it shows up in their time and attendance, and companies can be audited for this. Those breaks satisfy the rules that are proposed by the FMCSA that are being enforced July 1st to these drivers. So if they're following the California work rules or the California labor law rules, that would satisfy the needs as written in 395.3. The other one up here is, as we talk about what the co-driver in the passenger seat allows, is, like I said before, it's an allowance. It's something that the drivers couldn't do before, but now they can. It introduces a lot of complexities, but when it comes right down to it, the driver doesn't have to sit back in the sleeper berth if he's not on duty. And that was a situation in which if there's a roadside, if that co-driver was in any status, it was either on or it was in the sleeper berth. Well, now that co-driver can be in the passenger seat as essentially just a passenger and be off duty. But again, it's up to 2 hours, and there's a little bit of detail around that. Turnpike doesn't necessarily handle that with all of its complexities, mostly because there isn't that co-driver concept being connected to the vehicle, but we'll talk about that here in just a moment. So as we talk about this rule in more detail, and the reason there's more detail here is because it is far more complex. It has more situations in which activities need to be monitored and drivers need to be, co-drivers especially, need to be aware of what's going on. So like I said before, the prior regulation was if a co-driver is not in the sleeper berth, he has to be in an on-duty status. And that is all the way up and through June 30th. On July 1st, that co-driver, again, can be sitting in the passenger seat, be in an off-duty status. However, the regulations state that that off-duty status is required to be 2 hours or less. If it's any greater than 2 hours, it can't be counted as off-duty time. It now begins on-duty time. What we've done is we've written to the FMCSA, we've gotten their approval to automatically change that co-driver's status from off-duty to on once that timer gets to 2 hours and 1 minute. The other side of this is that 2 hours doesn't have to be a single chunk. It can be split. It can be before the birth status and after the birth status if necessary. It can be before or after. So again, it can't be greater than 2 hours, but it can be split before and after. Now the other side of it is that it does have to be connected to that sleeper berth. So if that co-driver is attempting to take off duty in the passenger seat, but it does not immediately follow or precede a sleeper berth status, it's no longer valid off duty. It would be considered as on duty, both daily duty and weekly duty. The other piece of that is that it has to be at least 8 hours of sleeper berth. So if that co-driver does, let's say, 1 hour in the passenger seat off duty, and then does 7 hours of sleeper berth, and then comes back out and tries to go either on duty or off duty or even go into to drive, that off-duty status that he tried to use prior to the sleeper berth, that passenger seat off-duty is no longer valid because it's not adjacent to a sleeper berth segment of at least 8 hours. So it needs to be adjacent to 8 hours or greater of sleeper berth. It also needs to be adjacent to a sleeper berth status of less than 10 hours. So sleeper berth status of 10 hours or greater is a daily reset. That's a full daily reset. A daily reset is any combination of off-duty or sleeper consecutively that would give a daily reset. So if that co-driver gets 10 hours in the sleeper berth, that creates a daily reset. Now, if that driver was off-duty in the passenger seat prior to that, that off-duty in the passenger seat is no longer valid off-duty. It is considered daily duty, is considered weekly duty, and therefore would go in their time and attendance as such. It would not impact them from a violations perspective because they were off-duty or on-duty. Doesn't matter because you'd have to be in a drive status to go into violation of any of those rules. If the co-driver tries to take off-duty following, so off-duty in the passenger seat following 10 hours or greater of sleeper berth, that would be invalid. That would be considered daily duty time, and that would start eating away at his 14 hours available for that current day. So just something to keep in mind. If that driver wants to take off-duty in the passenger seat, it needs to be adjacent to sleeper berth. The sleeper berth needs to be at least 8 hours and needs to be less than 10 hours. Otherwise, that off-duty in the passenger seat is no longer valid and would be considered as daily and weekly on-duty time. So pretty detailed situation, but it's very complex. The other piece of this is that the this new rule does not replace the split berth rule either. So the driver doesn't necessarily have to make this a full 10 hours. It doesn't need to combine to be a full 10 hours to get a reset. It can combine to be less than that. The driver would just have to know, the co-driver would have to know that he needs still a 2-hour off-duty or berth to get that reset back, just like the split berth rule is today. So just a couple things to keep in mind. So how does Turnpike handle this? Well, the co-driver in Turnpike would have his own device, and that device cannot connect to the route tracker because the route tracker has already been connected to by the primary driver. So if a co-driver has his device and he's known as a co-driver, and he tries to put himself in off-duty, he'll get this prompt that asks him if he's off-duty in the passenger seat, yes or no. And if he says yes, that's what's going to begin that 2-hour timer. And then, again, that co-driver can put himself into sleeper berth. It's going to do all the mathematics there. But this is a prompt that the driver would get if he is logged in as a co-driver and tries to put himself off-duty. It will give him this question. If the vehicle he's in is not enabled as a sleeper berth vehicle, he wouldn't have this solution. He wouldn't have the ability to go into sleeper berth and wouldn't get this prompt. It would just be for those that are considered to be sleeper berth vehicles, as well as only the co-driver who is logged in as in the co-driver status. From a weekly reset perspective, there's 2 new warnings for both the host and the driver. So if a driver tries to log in prior to getting his full reset today, he gets a warning saying that he hasn't had enough time off. These calculators are just being added to that. So it's not necessarily as though we're adding new screens or adding new prompts. What we're doing is we're adding to the logic that causes them. So if it's been less than 34 hours, that's the way it is today. They get that prompt and say you haven't gotten that full reset. But if it's greater than 34 hours, but they haven't gotten 2 off periods between 1 and 5, or it has been less than 168 hours since the beginning of their last weekly reset, they would get this prompt and say they're logging on too soon. And then if the driver tries to log in too soon, they would be able to proceed, but again, that would cause a violation once they started to drive. From a missed brake rule, the driver is going to get prompted. So if they are driving down the road, they will get a prompt. Within a half an hour of running out of time. So at 7 hours and 30 minutes of daily duty time, consecutive daily duty time, they'll get the warning to say that the driver that he needs to take that break within 30 minutes. If he misses it, it will go into violation. Again, if he's in motion, if he's in a drive status. If he's not in a drive status, there is no violation. So if a driver, let's say, works for 4 to 6 or 7 hours behind the wheel, he's driving half the day, and then he comes back and works in the office or in the warehouse or does other work, but that doesn't drive the second half of the day, he doesn't need a break. In California, yes, but according to the 395.3 rules, this would not require a break for that driver, because in order for him to drive the next day, he's going to need a 10-hour reset anyway, and that 10-hour reset obviously satisfies the 30-minute break. But again, it's only a violation if there is drive following the missed break. And here's a screen that the driver will get. So again, it happens with 7.5 hours at essentially the half hour before he'd go into violation. So at the top here, you've got on the screen the drive time to violation. This is a little bit of a change in the way we've presented this information. It used to be that it was just drive time available, duty time available, or drive time left, duty time left. And the reason for that was that it was always 11 and 14 unless the driver started the day with a lot less time than that. Well, the reality is that that timer was actually how much time the driver had until they would go into violation. Well, we've renamed that field, drive time to violation, and then at the bottom, right below that, I should say, we've put the actual 11, 14, and weekly timers there to show them how much time they have available in those rules. But that drive time to violation is a new warning or a new way of displaying how much time that driver has until he would go into violation. And then as you can see right below that, it says minimum 30 minutes rest break required. So we've got that yellow box around the drive time to violation. They would get this message at the 30 minutes, at 7 hours and 30 minutes, 30 minutes prior to needing to take that break. So a little bit of a difference for the drivers, a little bit, the fields essentially do exactly the same, a little bit of a different label. So just keep that in mind, is that when a driver logs in and starts their day and they only have 8 hours of drive available and 8 hours of duty available, that's what it's telling them, is that they've got that much time until they go into violation. We've added there at the bottom the 11-hour timer, the 14-hour timer, and then the weekly timer. And then if they continue to drive and they go into the violation of the missed break, as you can see here, the drive time to violation now goes red, and then it gives that minimum 30-minute break, rest break required. The violation screen, so if the driver goes into the violation list in his mobile, he would then be able to see that there are new violations shown there, and it would be a rest break in this case. So it's just adding it to the list of violations. And those are the big pieces that that Turnpike is doing to handle the new things. If we talk about the violation types, we talk about the log reports. All of these new violations, and really the only new violation is a rest break. The rest break violation will now be a new violation type code in the driver log reports. So in the remarks section, in all the reports, it's just a new violation type, new violation code. But that's the only real addition to those reports. The mobile has the most significant changes to it. The violations will perform exactly the same as other violations on the mobile. So with regard to any alerts and such, it's really coded exactly the same. So it will handle that exactly the same. I don't know if, I think some devices do support audible code, audible messages, and some do not. In that case, if your devices do support the audible alert, when that driver goes into violation or has that warning, that would occur the same as it would with other violations. So with the drive time violation and the duty time violation. With regard to getting training on this, this webinar here today is really just the start of things. Obviously, we're adding to the documentation to give all the screenshots, all the reporting examples, getting those updated in all of our documentation, updating the cab cards as well. So all the drivers will be able to get that new cab card. Again, that's in the documentation, can be printed and put in the cab. Again, if drivers want to have that additional cheat sheet essentially with them in the cab, they can go into the documentation and get that. That will be listed there as well. This video, as well as additional online videos for any training updates as we see fit. So as we get feedback from you guys, as we get feedback from other drivers and other customers, we'll determine whether or not we need to make additional videos to give an overview of these of the process or procedures as well. We will be adding to the documentation an overview of the rules, very similar to what we looked at here today. That will go through, that went through all the details essentially of what the rules are and the interpretation of them. So that content will be included in the documentation as well. And then we will also be conducting one more of these webinars the first week of June. So we will be having one more webinar where, again, if you wanted to join again, or if you wanted to send others from your organization to that webinar, that will be open as well. Invitation for that, or the meeting has not been set yet, but it will be the first week of June, and invitations for that will go out early next week. In addition to this, the video for this webinar, there will also be an FAQ or a Q&A, question and answer section that brings in the questions that have been brought up here today, as well as those that have been brought up from maybe some other related questions from our other customer line, product lines customers. So we will try to bring those together to make it valuable to everybody. But again, have that information available in the Turnpike documentation and download section. So that is pretty much all the slides that we wanted to talk about. In addition to, I'm sorry, the rollout. So as we talk about deploying this, the deployment of this is essentially available now. So if your drivers have been prompted to download a new version of TP Mobile, these items have been included in it already. But it doesn't mean that they're all active already. So there is a timer on there. July 1st is when they go live, when they're implemented. So once that happens, it will be put into effect, and then back on the host side with all the reports and everything there, that would happen as well at the same time. So your vehicles and your mobiles aren't sending in information that host can't handle, and vice versa. So it will be synced on July 1st, but the mobile application has already more than likely downloaded and installed that. If your drivers have been prompted, they will have already done that. So already been pushed, it's already available. If they have not downloaded it and installed it, we would suggest that they do so, but again, it's not going to be put into effect. The new rules are timed to be enabled essentially on July 1st. So that's it for the slides, and we do have a few questions here, so we want to hit on these before we are done. Is there a sound warning also? So that sound warning, as I mentioned, some devices do support the sound warning, some don't, and I don't know off the top of my head, I don't have a list of which ones do, but if your devices currently today are alerting your driver when they are low on drive time or low on available duty time, it would perform exactly the same for the upcoming break that they would need. As far as the PowerPoint presentation is concerned, yeah, I mentioned that this presentation is being recorded right now, and it will be made available. And we will also send out the slide presentation to those who have attended here today. So both the video with all the content and the narrative that we've gone through here today, but also just the slides themselves for some of the content. The new documentation. I don't have a timeline on it. It will definitely be deployed before July 1st. I think we are aiming for the end of this month, might be the middle of this month. I think May 17th or something might be the day that we start deploying all of our documentation surrounding the update. The release notes may already be available, and that might not go into the full level of detail, but it would at least discuss what the changes are. With the full documentation, should be before even June 1st. They should be in effect before then. And we may need to get a better answer. As I mentioned, all your questions here today are logged, and we will get full answers and get them deployed along with the recording of this webinar. Has a new version been tested? Yes, the new version's been through a lot of tests. As a matter of fact, the code was complete the beginning of March. I think either the last week of February or the first week of March was in beta testing, even beyond our own QA. So we did QA for about a month, regression testing for a little bit longer than that, and then it was in the field in beta testing for a while. And so I think beta test is either complete right now, or we have some other people still trickling in because they want to see how it works in their operation. And again, that's just part of the beta test. And in that case, yeah, it's been through a lot of tests, and the beta testing is essentially just wrapping up as we speak. Is there now a final version? Yes, there is a final version, but it has not been deployed. It's not part of our beta. It's essentially the same as beta, but it, I'm sorry, yeah, I think if you only have the beta version right now, there should be a final version that, again, is not enabled essentially until July 1st. And I think that's, for those of you who might already have the beta version, I think the new final version would replace it and have the timer in place. So if you have a client manager, please contact your client manager. If not, contact support, and we will try to arrange to get that to you so that your devices are ready to go and you don't have to wait and get it all deployed at the last minute for sure. So I think there's one mention here that somebody's been testing this and has seen maybe a couple of things not performing exactly as expected. I would definitely encourage you to contact support, see if there is a new version, a new beta version that maybe has not been sent out to you yet. Maybe it hasn't been enabled on your device yet. So I guess I would recommend contacting either, again, support or your client manager and finding out if that's something that needs to be updated, because the presentation we went through today is what is the final version that will be deployed come July, or that will be enabled on July 1st. So those are the questions that we have related to our topic here today. If you have additional questions, again, please contact your client manager or support. If you're beta testing and something is not necessarily performing as expected, definitely contact us, contact our support line. Again, contact your client manager if at all possible, and they will be able to drive the changes that might be necessary for you, or if there's any, again, any bug fixes that have to occur. Again, it is in beta. Even though beta is wrapping up, it doesn't mean that we can't still find maybe something that requires a little fix, but we definitely would like that feedback if you do have an issue. Again, if it's a versioning issue, we can get that fixed very quickly for you. So with that said, if you do have more questions, let us know, and we will get something sent out to all of you guys here in the next few days or so to let you know where to find the recording of this session, as well as the Q&A that has come out from it. So we will get that out to you guys here shortly and know where to get these resources. So I'd like to thank you all for your time here today. I know we didn't take up the full hour, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Give you guys a little bit of time back. But thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for contributing here today, and we will hear from you guys hopefully shortly. As you, if you need to get these updates deployed, please let us know. But thank you very much. We appreciate your time.